Hi, welcome everybody to Reading Horizons at Home webinar series. We are with Chantel Barrett, who is doing part 3 of our Parent's Guide to Teaching Reading using a proven Orton-Gillingham system. So for those of you who don't know Chantel, she is on our curriculum team and actually helps coordinate our trainings for Reading Horizons. She's also our dyslexia specialist, very knowledgeable and has worked with all types of learners and pretty much runs the gamut for who she's taught from kindergarten or pre-kindergarten age to an adult over the age of 60. So Chantel is with us, and I'll pass the time over to her now. Feel free to ask any questions and type them in the box on the right-hand side. Chantel, go ahead.
Okay, thanks. Thanks for being here today. I know we're small in numbers. We're going to record this. Things are always crazy coming outside of the holidays, but this is actually my favorite one to present on. This is my favorite chapter because there is so much that happens here. It is so powerful, and so this one is where you're really going to see such amazing gains with your child and those that you're working with because of a few key things that happen in this third section. So what I want to take you through then today, again, just a quick reminder, kind of what I've gone through before, is just the importance of the process, that the way that we instruct this is what makes the difference. The content is fantastic, but again, the way that it's presented is what's so important. So again, looking at making that process very intentional. And I'm going to point to the things that we've done in the last two sessions, part 1 and part 2, have really intentionally laid the foundation for what's going to happen in this third chapter, and is what makes it so accessible and makes students so successful at a very quick pace because of the intentional foundation that we've laid, going through things very explicitly, starting very simply. Again, we're going to function very much the same way in this chapter, working sequentially to the more complex, chunking information that well we can. And this is where we're going to really see the core framework of the 5 phonetic skills and how powerful that can be for teaching a lot of concepts that can sometimes be problematic, but in this instance are just so accessible because of using this familiar framework of those 5 phonetic skills. So again, the framework that we focused on, the 42 sounds, we started working in that. Letter to sound correspondence, building simple single syllable words with that short vowel sound initially, going through blends, some spelling skills, and now we're ready to move into those 5 phonetic skills that we're going to talk about today, and the next time get to talk about the 2 decoding skills. So one of the things that happens when we move into chapter 3 is we take the next step from just simply marking the words to proving them. And that's the verbiage you need to use with those that you're working with, your children or friends or whatever you're working with, that instead of just saying, okay, well, mark the word, you say, well, prove it to me now, let's prove the pronunciation of this word. So because we are ready to move into that realm, we talk about how there is a short and long sound to our vowels. And, for your older children, they may already know that, but now we're going to prove why it's short when it is and long when it is. So we do use the diacritical markings of the brev up here for the short sound and the macron or the line for that long name of the vowel. One of the things that we do in our manuals that you can see and on the software is we'll kind of use an anchor to help them know what that marking is, kind of make some sort of visual connection for them, so it's just not some random arc and line. You can draw the word short above the vowel and you can create the S, so you start up here with the curve and come down, and that bottom of your letter S creates that brev. So you can write the word short and say, when you see when the vowel's going to make it short sound, a, or I, and then say, I want you to be able to prove that to me. But I don't want you to have to write short above all those vowels because that would be more work than you need to do. So what you can do, and then you just erase all of the word except for the very bottom of that letter S. And when you do that, that helps them remember that's the bottom of the S and that means short. Now, when we're talking about the long sound or the names of the vowels, you can write the word long. So you create the L, you draw the top part of the L, a capital L there over that vowel, and that creates the vowels so that you can see the L in the word long. And then when we have the word long, that is what you can use to connect the vowel sound. So you can erase everything but the bottom of that L, and you've got the line above those vowel sounds. And that helps them know. The other thing is sometimes, you know, if you get hung up on it, it doesn't really take any longer to say the name than it does the sound. One thing that I've said is you can say this is the sound of the vowel, and you can write the word sound above it and still use the bottom of the S for the breve, and then say, you know, what's at the top of every paper you get? It'll say name with a line next to it to write your name on. So line means name. And that's another way you can approach that to talk about those markings that we're going to use. So now we're ready to teach the 5 phonetic skills to be able to prove whether the vowel is going to be long or short within a word and then eventually within syllables. So again, it's really important to stay consistent with the process that they've become proficient in, and that is that they're going to look and work underneath the word left to right and mark everything they find, blends and vowels. So when we've done that, on this initial phonetic skill, it's a pattern of a word we've already worked with, that CVC pattern. They're going to know that word is met. But what you want to do to show them why this next step is so important is say, okay, it's met, you're right, but now prove it to me. Why is it met and not meet? Now that you know E can be long or short, why is it short here? Tell me why. Give me the why. Prove it to me. And that's why you change the verbiage to just marking the word to proving it. So it's only what follows our vowels that determine their pronunciation, never what precedes it. So let me say that one more time because that's really important. It is only what follows our vowels that determine their pronunciation, not what precedes them. So because of that, that initial consonant really doesn't make a difference in the pronunciation of the vowel sound. So we're not going to mark that. One of the reasons I love our program's marking system is because we don't just mark everything to mark it. There's nothing unnecessary. It's always intentional. All of our markings either determine pronunciation or movement in syllabication. All of our markings either determine pronunciation or movement in syllabication. So that being said, I want to mark the parts of that word, the pattern, that create and affect pronunciation. So to do that, since it's what follows it, my process is going to be this. Once I've worked underneath the word left to right, I'm going to pretend that I'm still on a road that I stay on, so I'm not just driving all over crazy. I'm going to come down to the end of my word and come up and around the word and drive back towards that vowel to prove it. So as I come up and around the end and I look at what's following my vowel, if I have a consonant there and just one, nothing else following it, that gets to be a guardian consonant, and we indicate that by putting a guardian star or an asterisk on top of that. That indicates that that is what's important. That guardian star tells me, because a guardian's job is to protect. You can talk about that with your child. You know, what does a guardian do? It protects. I've seen lots of teachers have them do an art project this day and have them draw a picture of what they think the guardian would look like. Some draw soldiers, some draw angels, you know, whatever makes sense to them, but it helps them connect that a guardian's job is to protect. Protect something smaller, short, that short vowel. This guardian will protect that vowel and keep it saying its short sound. So phonetic skill 1 is this. When you have one guardian consonant and nothing else following your vowel will be short. And that's why the vowel sound is eh and the word is met. I remember going through another program with my son Tyler, and he's very hung up on the visual pattern. And so he learned that it was short because it was a CVC pattern. But then I gave him the word in, I-N, and he didn't know what to do with it because he couldn't see that initial consonant. It came out of the range of that pattern, when really that initial consonant didn't have squat to do with how that vowel is pronounced. So when we were able to realize that and work with this, well, in, I-N, you've still got a guardian following the I, and that's why the I is short, just like in this case with the word met. So we're pointing to what matters, what is key in that vowel pronunciation, and that is really helps them focus, filter out what's unnecessary, focus on what's really important in this instance, and really empower them with understanding why that's met and not meet. So just to practice that in another example, working left to right, the first thing I come across is my blend, then my vowel, come up and around the end. I do have a guardian consonant and nothing else, so my vowel will be short. So my vowel sound is it, and my word is trim. Remember, again, I've talked about this before, so in the first 2 sessions, so I won't go into this in depth, but how important at this point, as soon as you model and go through that first phonetic skill, to move into the process of dictation, where those loops that we talked about, that phonological loop going from the sensory input to motor output to sensory input, and the orthographic going from the sensory input of hearing to the motor output of writing to the sensory input of seeing and reading and processing what's in front of them. That happens in this process of dictation, and that is really key, where you would practice words that follow that phonetic skill. You'd say it twice, they say it twice, have them write it on a whiteboard, not pencil and paper right now, on a whiteboard. So they're using large motor skills. They're employing that frontal hemisphere to help with working memory and crossing hemispheres during this process. And then they're able to mark it, and now they can move into this step, which is so exciting. They're able to prove the word, and and then they'll read it to you based upon how they proved it. Now at this point, this is something that I wanted to bring up again for this reason, because when we come back here, if I were to dictate the word trim, I've already proven the vowel sound. They can hear it short. So at this point, when you're working the phonetic skills, you may want to actually spell the words to them in dictation first. So if you spell the words, you're actually going to change that process slightly. You'll just spell it once, or you can spell it twice. Sometimes once is easier to hold for some in sequence memory. So I would say T-R-I-M, and then I'd have them say back T-R-I-M, and then as they're writing it, I would continue to spell it for them a few times as needed. The other thing I do is that I'll hold up the number of fingers for how many letters I have. So as I'm dictating the letters, I would hold up a finger representing each letter so they know when I get done they should have 4 letters on their paper. Trim is 4 letters. That helps with a couple of things, letter to sound correspondence. It helps with when that pattern comes out of that, where we have one sound connected to 2 letters. It helps them start to discern between the phonology and the orthography, but right now, because we're direct correspondence, that's great, but we're going to come out of that right now, moving into these other skills. So that's really helpful to actually spell first. A lot of great things can happen, and it builds sequence memory. So just a suggestion that when you move to these phonetic skills, you may want to change dictation initially to spelling the words and then going ahead and dictating the other way, so you're doing both processes where you're giving the word and then they're spelling and proving it. So that could be helpful in that this kind of changes it up at this point. So now the second phonetic skill, very similar to the first, working underneath this word left to right, you mark your vowel. MP is not a blend, but as I come up and around that word to prove that vowel sound, they both act as guardian consonants, and so the vowel will also get to be short in this instance. So 2 guardian consonants following my vowel is going to be short. So again, one of the things that is really important, I can't tell you how many kids I've worked with, and adults even, where, you know, they'll put the correct markings, they'll prove it correctly, but then they'll pronounce it incorrectly. A lot of times the connections that we make automatically that we think would be automatic aren't for them. And so, you know, they may put the brev on top but pronounce that U long. So one of the things that I do is make that connection very clear. I say, okay, so my vowel sound, is it long or short? It's short. So what's my vowel sound? What's my word? Jump. So I have them say whether the vowel is long or short, and then I immediately have them say, and this is also prompted in the manuals, then you immediately want them to pronounce just the vowel sound and then the entire word. So my vowel is short, so my vowel sound is and my word is jump. So I'll kind of say that to them and let them fill it in. So I'll say, so your vowel is, and have them say short. I'll say, so your vowel sound is what? And then have them fill in and so your word is, and then have them say jump. And that can be really important to helping them make the connection between that markings, the markings that prove whether it's long or short, and then that proves the pronunciation. It just helps make those dots connect in a very clear and concise way for some who might struggle a little bit with those connections. So another example, this word, I have a blend at the first, mark my vowel, and T is not a blend, come up and around the end as I work back. I've got 2 guardian consonants following my vowels. My vowel will be short, so my vowel sound is and my word is plant. Now the third phonetic skill, working left to right, mark my vowel. This time I have nothing following my vowel. My vowel stands alone. So they're going to learn, and we use, again, we're very intentional in the verbiage. It's not that they have to say back the skill or the rule down here that you see verbatim. That's not important. They can say it in their own words. That's why we don't have them listed on posters or anything like that. We want them to be able to tell us in their own words, but we do say, rather than saying when a vowel is at the end of a word, for two reasons. One, that's not always true about a vowel at the end of a word, and we're also teaching, these 5 skills are not only patterns for single syllable words, but for syllable types. So our verbiage has to apply both to single syllable words and to syllable types. So that's really important there. So this is one where that's very important. So when a vowel stands alone with no guardians after it, it's going to be long. That's why my vowel sound is E, and my word is me. Practice that again, working left, right, mark my vowel. And then I'll say, so is your vowel going to be long or short? Long. How come? Stands alone. Good. So what's your vowel sound? O. What's your word? Go. Then we can move on to the fourth phonetic skill. This is our silent E skill. Working left to right on this word, we marked our S blend, we marked our I, we marked our E. We've got 2 vowels this time. However, only one is working because when E is at the end of a word, it's always going to be silent. We're going to indicate that by drawing a line through that E and through the X. The reason we go all the way down through the X when we cross that out is because we want them to be able to count their X's to know how many syllables that word's going to be. If you've got 1 X, that means you've got 1 working vowel. That means this word is still 1 syllable. And later on, when we get to the part 4 next month, you're going to see how important that is because we're going to be able to count their X's in a multisyllabic word, count their working vowels to know how many syllables that word's actually going to be before they even pronounce the word. They can do it from a visual, just looking at it orthographically, which is great for students, so powerful. So as I work back, as I'm working back to prove that vowel sound, if I only have 1 consonant in between, my E can reach that previous vowel and it will make it long. So when I have a silent E at the end, the previous vowel, that first vowel, is long. So again, to practice that, working left to right, I marked my vowels. I see E at the end, so I immediately know it's going to be silent, and that first vowel then will be long, and that's why that word is time. We want to give them some comparison. Word sorts are great when you get into phonetic skills. A lot of that's embedded within our program, but just so that they can be able to say, you know, this word is pin because it's got a guardian, and this word is pine because of that silent E. There's a lot of examples of comparing between phonetic skill 1 and 4. Cap and cape, hop and hope, mad and made. And show them the power of when you add that E, it changes not only pronunciation but the meaning of the word. Always when you're dictating and talking about these words, using them in context sentence, talking about what they mean. So we're continually building vocabulary throughout. So the 5th and final phonetic skill is what we call our adjacent vowel rule. So the adjacent vowels mean right next to. So we talk about the term adjacent and what that means. Now there are some additional pronunciations for some of our adjacent vowels. EA, for example, has 4 pronunciations, but we're not going to teach those all at once. That would be confusing. We want to focus on one concept at a time. That's really part of being systematic and explicit, that we want to focus on one concept at a time in a framework of other concepts that they already know. So we want to do that and only focus on the most common pattern, common pronunciation when we have an adjacent vowel pattern. That is that the second one will be silent and that first one will be long. Now T would not be a guardian here. And let me jump back. Sometimes there's some confusion on phonetic skill 4 and 5. They think because that consonant is following that vowel that it should be a guardian. Now remember, this is not a guardian because if I had a guardian star here, my vowel would be short. But wait a minute, my E makes it long. It can't be long and short at the same time. Phonetic skill 1 is when I have one guardian and nothing else following my vowel. But I do have something else. I have that silent E, and that's what makes it long. So I don't have a guardian here, and the same with adjacent vowel skill. The T just gives me an ending sound. It's not guarding anything. It doesn't have to make anything short here. The adjacent vowel pattern is what rules. That second one will be silent, and the first one will be long. So practicing that again, working left to right, marking my R blend, marking my vowels. Second one, because I see them as adjacent or right next to each other, then I know to apply that 5th phonetic skill that that second one will be silent and that first one will be long. So my vowel sound is A and my word is grain. So again, what this opens up, all of these words they can now prove based upon these 5 phonetic skills and know how they're pronounced, and not only just how they're pronounced, but why they're pronounced that way. So these 5 phonetic skills, 2 short vowel, 3 long vowel, we're going to use this framework to teach 2 concepts that, I'll be very honest, when I was teaching English, I literally wanted to call in sick the day I had to teach adding suffixes, because I was the student in college, and you know, subsequently after that, I was the teacher who was still like not totally clear on, am I doubling my consonant when I add my ending? Am I dropping my E? You know, what am I doing here? That can be confusing. So we're going to use this simple framework that they're already proficient in to teach a new concept. Again, how important that is to take new information, plug it into the framework of something familiar for them to learn so quickly. So we're going to, again, these are the key things I'm talking about. One concept at a time that's practiced to proficiency. When they're proficient there, we can use that familiar framework. It will help them organize the information coming in, categorize it, and filter it. Students and children and adults who struggle with processing issues with reading, part of the diagnosis now is having an executive function deficit. Which falls as working memory, along with the ability to organize information, categorize it, filter what's important, not important, which is, it's overwhelming for them. They don't do that automatically. And so anytime we can do that for them, organize the information that we're presenting, not just in our program, but whatever you're teaching at home, organizing it and categorizing it and categories, and filtering out was focusing on one key thing at a time, it's really going to help in their learning process, so that concepts that are new are actually learned at a much quicker pace than they would be if we presented it any other way. So let's talk about this. This is one of my favorite things. So if we have the word run, okay, and I want to make it running, let's pretend I didn't double that consonant and I had R-U-N-I-N-G. Well, when there's only one consonant in between, then that I can reach the U and make it long, because any vowel following can make the vowel preceding long if it can touch it, if it can reach. That means it's either got to be right next to it or only have one consonant in between. One of the best ways to show this, and I've done this, if you've got enough people to do it, great. If you don't, I've done it on chairs and shown them. So get the letters out and have, you know, the kids spell run. You can get some neighbor kids over, or if you can use chairs, whatever, put the letters on it and spell run. Then have someone be ing, have someone be I, someone N, someone G, or the chairs. Put them together and ask I if it can reach over the chair and touch you, and it will be able to if there's only one chair or one person in between. But when you double the consonant and add another letter there, I can no longer, regardless of the size of individuals you're using or the size of chair, the person now that's pretending to be the I, and it can just be your one child you're working with, can no longer reach the chair with the U or the person holding the U. This really drills home that when you've got 2 consonants in between, the vowels following will no longer affect the vowel preceding. We want to keep this vowel short. So it's as simple as this. When your base word follows phonetic skill number 1, you will always double the consonant before adding your suffix. Now the reason we don't, you notice over here, we don't have any of the markings. I didn't mark my vowel even, I didn't mark my guardian. Very intentionally why we don't do that, okay? Very intentional on our part. We want to show the difference between the base word and the word with the suffix, okay? Because we've got a different thing happening here. It changes meaning, usage, all of those things. Trying to prove it too, with when you've got a suffix added, you're into multi-syllable, you've got different things going on, and that's more problematic than it needs to be. So we want to stay simple. So we prove the base word. If they run on to the word running in their reading and they want to prove it, you have them break it down to the base word, prove that, and then come back to their suffix. They would work backwards. They would just underline their suffix, realize I've got a double consonant, which means my base word is here, and then prove that and work back. But when you're working the other direction, you always want to prove the base word, then have them rewrite it completely. Don't just add on the suffix with all these markings. rewrite it, and add and underline your suffix. So I would want to dictate the base word first. So I'd say run, run. They'd say back, run, run, write it, mark it, prove it. And then I'll say, okay, now add the suffix ing, or I could say now make it running, and then I could dictate running, 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 running. And then they would go ahead and add that suffix ing, but they would know how to spell it correctly because they would know my base word follows phonetic skill 1. I proved that, so now I know to double the consonant before adding my suffix. Phonetic skill 2 base words, they've already got 2 consonants, so the vowel's going to already be protected. So if it follows phonetic skill 2, all I have to do is add and underline my suffix. Now again, these are inflectional suffixes, and ones that start with vowels are ing, ed, er, and est, and that's why we have to be so careful about the spelling pattern, because that vowel can affect that pronunciation. It's different when your suffix starts with a consonant, which we handle a little bit later. Now, if in a phonetic skill 3 word, we only have 2 phonetic skill 3 words that you can add a suffix to, go and be. So you'll see we don't have a lot of practice words in that, obviously, when you get to that point. But we do have an example here where if it follows phonetic skill 3, all you need to do is add and underline your suffix. Phonetic skill 4, this is where the light bulb really went on for me. Because we mark that E as silent, and you can see that already marked out and it's at the end, you can just take it off. Drop that E off and go ahead and add and underline your suffix, and that's why the word is smiling. Now if your base word follows phonetic skill number 5, you do have a crossed off vowel, a silent vowel, but it's not at the end of the word, so you can't drop it off. And so they just know that when your base word follows phonetic skill number 5, you're just going to go ahead and add and underline your suffix. So something that could be really confusing, a lot of other programs just try to teach it per word, whether you're going to double it or what, when it's really this simple. If your base word follows phonetic skill 1, double your consonant, add your suffix. Phonetic skill 2, just add your suffix. Phonetic skill 3, add your suffix. Phonetic skill 4, drop your E, add your suffix. Phonetic skill 5, add your suffix. And it's that simple. These lessons are taught kind of in between, so they'll learn phonetic skill 1 and 2, and then they'll learn adding suffixes to those, so it's kind of broken down. But it's simpler for me in this process to kind of show you all together, but it gives them some time to practice it at their pacing once they've learned those skills. But so powerful for them to understand that if I know what skill my base word follows, I know how to spell it with a suffix added. One of the lessons, and I usually don't bring up a ton of the extra stuff, but this one is really exciting and so helpful it was for me, and I guess that's why I found it helpful to share in this, is the pronunciations of ED. I never understood why ED would say duh like in, hugged, and t like in kicked, and have more of, kind of that schwa sound or an additional vowel sound like in planted. So here's what happens. They learn the concept of voiced and voiceless early on with those digraphs TH. We just did that in part 2. And so what happens here is they learn that there are certain consonants, and they learned this before too, but it's re-emphasized. Certain consonants are what we call voiceless, meaning there's you can hear the word, but there's no vibrations created in the voice box. So they're voiceless, like F, K, P, S, and X. Well, when ED follows the voiceless letters, it remains voiceless and says t. We really shoot ourselves in the foot when we ever present ed as saying ed. It never says ed as a suffix. It says id occasionally, but only if it's directly following a T or D. It usually just says t or d, based upon whether it's following a voiceless consonant or a voiced consonant. Certain sounds we should introduce. The reason it's spelled ed, even though the E isn't sounded, is because that spelling is a visual pattern to let me know this means something. This is what we call morpheme. It's a small morpheme that holds meaning. This means past tense, happened before now. And so when I see, because if we just use the letter D or T for these sounds, that wouldn't hold meaning. That wouldn't make sense. We wouldn't understand that. We have to have a spelling pattern that holds meaning. So even though we use ED, it only is pronounced as that one sound, T, as in huffed, kicked, mixed, and dressed, because they're following voiceless consonants, or it can say duh when it's following these voiced consonants listed here, such as sobbed, hugged, pulled, and filmed. Now again, the only time it actually has a vowel sound when ED is added as a suffix is if it's directly following a letter T or a letter D, which makes sense. It can't make those sounds back to back. It'll put that schwa sound or that short I sound in between. And that's why you get the words planted, ended, faded, batted, you know, all of those examples. So that's just a really great thing that they get to learn as well to help them understand how to pronounce that and why that's happening. Again, our program is so about the why. They just learned why the vowels are long or short. Now they know why ED is pronounced 3 ways instead of just saying, oh, it just is. You know, I am just such a person that I'm willing to get on board with anything if I understand why and if it makes sense to me why we're doing it that way. And that's what this is designed to do, is to make sense and empower them with the why behind it. The last thing that they're going to do, and there's a couple other little things, obviously, as always, some grammar lessons, those reference lessons, some most common word lessons, some extra spelling skills in there that I won't go into today on spelling with C and K and KE, you know, those are in there as well, just in correlation with those phonetic skills, and you'll see that throughout. But this is a big change here, and this is the last thing that you'll kind of hit at the end of Chapter 3 that I wanted to finish up with today. So we get into another sound for C and G. The best way to start this is to kind of go back and review the CK skill. C will take AO and U, and K will take the other two. And you say, yep, that's right. So what happens then? Because there are some words that C can actually come before an I or an E. What happens there? Well, they learn this skill. When C is followed by the vowels E or I, what happens is that sound of C changes from K to S. They get a new marking at this point, so there's kind of a lot going on for them. This is the one arc we have on top because it's kind of connecting those letters and showing that when in sequence that C is followed by the E, it's going to go ahead and create that soft S sound. So we're drawing attention to those two letters and the sequence of it being followed by. If it precedes it, it doesn't matter. It's when it's followed by. So when they're marking the word, their sequence would be this: mark my I, mark my E is silent. As I'm working back, I see that CE, so I can put my bridge S or rainbow S in the younger program. Because both of them are arcs on top, we've used the term bridge for the older students, so depending on how your child responds, bridge may make more sense, or rainbow, whichever they prefer. But then also that E has double duty this time, creating that soft S sound and then also making the vowel I long, and that gives us the word nice. Another example, we've got our TW blend. Marking my vowels, I see E is silent. As I work back, there's my CE again, C followed by an E, so I have my bridge or rainbow S, and my I is long, so my word is twice. Then we talk about, now let me go back to this really quick. One thing that's amazing, because this is like seriously doesn't happen very often in English, but this is 100% of the time. Every time C is followed by I or an E, that sound is S. That is so great to be able to anchor themselves on the dependability of that that's going to say S every time. G is a little bit of a different animal. Has kind of a similar thing that happens when it's followed by the same vowels E or I. It also changes to a soft sound. It goes from G to J. This is bridge or rainbow J. And this sound, however, does not occur 100% of the time. It's a large percentage of the time, but not 100%. Like we have words like get and geese and giggle where that isn't the case. But most of the time, particularly G followed by E, will do this. So marking my vowels, I see E at the end of a word, and G followed by an E says J, and that E also makes that A long, so my word is cage. Another example, marking my vowels, E is silent at the end of the word. Working back, I see that G followed by an E, so it produces my rainbow or bridge J, and my first vowel is long, so my vowel sound is A, and my word is page. So one of the things that's really cool to note here is we never end an English word in J, ever. So if you hear J at the end of a word, it's going to be spelled G-E. So a huge spelling help here where that's going to produce that J sound at the end of a word. Now we have a couple of things that can come up with these rainbow and bridge C and G, where we can actually have another consonant here to keep the vowel short. So we've got two consonants because we're still producing a rainbow sound at the end, but it will keep the vowel short, because remember when we had them stand up, or you use the chairs on run and running, if you've got two consonants in between vowels, the vowel following can no longer affect the vowel preceding. Because of that, we can have a word like dance, and I'm sorry I don't have an example of that one up. I couldn't find one quick enough, but like the word dance, if they were to mark the word dance, they would still have their vowel A and E marked. The E would be silent. They'd have their rainbow or bridge S over their CE, but they have an N and a C before that E can reach to the A, so that A gets to stay short. Because of that, those will come back on as guardians, so you'll see a guardian star there, and that's why those come back on. One of the ways that I explain that is like, you think about cops. When a cop's on duty, wears his badge. When he's off duty, takes it off. If those guardians are not on duty, if the consonant's not being a guardian at the time, it doesn't wear its badge. Like an example of these two, they're consonants, but they're not acting as guardians. That's not their job right now. But like in the word dance, when C and N get to come back on as guardians, because there's two of them, because cops work in pairs, so when there's two of them, they get to go back on duty, they put their badge back on, and then that vowel sound is protected from that E, and that's why the vowel sound can be short, like in dance or prince. And then we have DGE with that same kind of a thing to keep a short vowel sound, like in words like bridge. You can see that word right there. We've got those two consonants that create kind of that buffering. They get to act as guardians to protect it from that E, to give me a short vowel sound I here, but I still have my bridge, so I can produce that just sound at the end of that word. And that's all talked about in that lesson too. But really helpful, because again, that's logical. They understand that. You explain, if you take the time to explain, that's really important when you're talking about teaching, adding those suffixes, to take the time to do some physical example to explain when you've got two consonants in between, and use objects or people or something to show them, and have them stand there and try to reach that first vowel. With one in between, they can. If they're right next to it, they can. But if there's two or more, they will no longer be able to reach that first vowel and affect it to change it from short to a long sound. So those can be really, really key things to do, some simple little things that can really be a big help in understanding the concepts that are taught in this chapter. This chapter has a lot in it. But this chapter is where I will usually see grade level jumps in those that I'm working with if I haven't seen significant gains yet. This is so empowering when they move from just marking a word to proving it. This is, we talk a lot about the wow factor, having that wow factor and what happens. And this is actually my son that's dyslexic, and he did this for a 5th grade project. They had to do something to show the word wow, and he created that with his mouth and his hands, and kind of fun. He won an award for it, but every time I see it, it just reminds me of what this has done for him, that it was just such a wow moment. And every teacher I work with, every parent I work with, every student, every child, every adult, there is this moment where they seriously will look at you and go, wow. Like, wow, I get it. I see now. And the light bulb tends to go on for everybody at a different time. But most of them, I see some major light bulbs start to go on during this 3rd chapter, where they get to move into the power of proving words and proving different pronunciations for the other sound for C and G. How do I prove a word, when I've got a suffix? What do I do? They just open up so much knowledge in this chapter. And so exciting for him to see those gains. So that's the core of what I wanted to take you through today. If you have any questions, please feel free to type them in. We are recording this, of course, so that you can see that later on. And I'm always available if you send questions in to Josh, and I can look at them as well. He passes some of those along if needed. But this chapter is really probably the core of it. It's kind of what everything else hangs on. We do a lot of intentional laying of the foundation before, marking vowels, finding blends, all of those things. And then this is where it's so important that they really are proficient in this, because everything from this point on is going to be dependent upon them knowing those 5 phonetic skills. This is kind of a turning point, and I love that it comes in the middle. Again, everything's been intentionally laid for this purpose, and then everything after will rest upon that purpose, and that's what's so powerful about it. So I'm not seeing any questions. I'm sorry, I think I may have muted Josh. I'll unmute you, Josh, so if you need to say anything else. Still not seeing any questions, so I think we're okay. So Josh, if you want to finish things up.
Okay, Chantel, I had a comment for you actually. You know,
Oh, okay.
I've kind of struggled with reading throughout my life when I was younger, and I feel like I was kind of taught intermittently. Some rules really stuck with me, and others I don't believe I remember even any of these rules that we kind of went over today. But one of them I noticed when I was younger, I learned the suffix roll with ing, and that really stuck with me. And I hear a lot of times from parents, well, that are new to this program, how are my kids going to remember all these words? Or remember all these rules and everything that goes along with it. Well, just right there, the ing really did stick with me, but I don't believe I was taught anything else in this third chapter, and until I started working here. So I kind of struggled other ways that way, but these rules, they really do stick out for children, and it almost becomes natural. And I see that after children have gone through the program, parents, recommend us to other parents, and they really do see that it just comes natural after it's been taught, and you really don't have to remember the rule because it is natural to us to really pick those small rules up.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's, again, I've talked about this every session, because the process, the way that we teach it, makes it so it becomes automatic, and it just is the way they look at words. It becomes like breathing. They don't have to think about it. And so yeah, exactly. I'm glad you pointed that out. It really is, and those 5 phonetic skills, and you think about it, I mean, there's programs I went through with my son that were like 30 rules, or, it was just so ominous for him, but 5? I can do 5, and so really those simple things just kind of come back into that framework, and really they're able to become automatic and have that be a natural process for them. So absolutely.
Great. Well, thanks, Chantel. Thanks for everybody that attended, and this will be recorded. Please take a look at this. After it's been recorded, I'll send an email out here within the next few days. Thanks again, and have a great day.